On May 5, 1945, something happened that sounded completely impossible. American soldiers stood on the walls of an ancient castle, aiming their rifles beside German soldiers, not against each other, but against the Waffen-SS. For a few unbelievable hours, enemies became allies, fighting one final battle together. It remains one of the strangest stories of World War. How did this happen? To understand that, we have to go back several years before the war reached its bloody end. Hidden deep inside the Austrian Alps stood Castle Itter, a beautiful medieval fortress that had watched over the valley for more than 7 centuries. It looked like something from a fairy tale, surrounded by forests and mountains. But after Nazi Germany annexed Austria in 1938, the castle's peaceful history came to an end. The Nazis transformed it into a special prison under the control of Dachau concentration camp. This wasn't an ordinary prison. The people locked inside weren't common soldiers or criminals. They were some of France's most important political figures, former prime ministers, famous generals, a world champion tennis player, and even the sister of Charles de Gaulle. These prisoners weren't kept alive out of kindness. They were valuable hostages. If Germany ever needed to negotiate with the Allies, these famous prisoners could become powerful bargaining chips. Years passed. Outside the castle, Europe was burning. Millions died. Entire cities disappeared beneath bombs. But inside Castle Itter, the prisoners waited, never knowing whether they would survive long enough to see freedom. Then everything changed. By April 1945, Adolf Hitler was dead. Berlin had collapsed. Germany was falling apart faster than anyone expected. Most German soldiers knew the war was over, but one group refused to surrender, the Waffen-SS. Unlike many regular German soldiers, these fanatical units continued fighting with almost suicidal determination. Even worse, rumors began spreading across Austria. The high-profile prisoners inside Castle Itter might soon be executed before American forces could rescue them. Inside the castle, fear replaced hope. Freedom seemed close, yet death felt even closer. Then something completely unexpected happened. The German guards abandoned the castle. One by one, they disappeared into the mountains, leaving the prisoners completely alone. No guards, no protection, no supplies, just frightened civilians trapped inside a castle surrounded by a collapsing battlefield. The prisoners knew they had only one chance. Someone had to escape, and somehow find help before the SS arrived. The man who volunteered for the mission wasn't a soldier. He was the castle's Czech cook, secretly connected to the resistance. Slipping through the castle gates under the cover of darkness, he crossed forests and enemy territory, hoping anyone was still willing to help. After hours of searching, he reached the nearby town of Wurgl. There he met a man no one expected would become a hero, Major Joseph Gangl. Gangl was a German army officer. For years he had fought for Germany on different fronts. But by 1945 everything had changed. He had seen enough death, enough destruction, and enough pointless sacrifice. He no longer believed in Hitler's war. Instead of following Nazi orders, Gangl secretly worked with the Austrian resistance, protecting local civilians from fanatical SS units that still terrorized nearby towns. When he heard about the prisoners trapped inside Castle Itter, he made his decision immediately. He would help them, but there was one problem. Gangl only had a handful of loyal soldiers. If the SS launched a full attack, they had almost no chance of surviving. He needed help from the very people he had spent years fighting. So Major Gangl climbed into his vehicle and drove straight toward the American front line. Instead of raising his rifle, he raised his hands. Waiting there was Captain John C. Jack Lee Jr., commander of an American Sherman tank. Imagine the moment. A German officer walked toward American soldiers, asking them not to surrender, but to fight beside him. It sounded unbelievable. Yet after hearing about the trapped prisoners, Captain Lee didn't hesitate for long. He understood that innocent lives were at stake. Together, the two former enemies created one of the strangest military alliances in history, an American tank crew, a group of German soldiers who had turned against the Nazis, members of the Austrian resistance. All preparing to defend a castle filled with French prisoners. Time was running out. The small rescue force drove toward Castle Itter as quickly as possible. The roads were damaged, bridges had been destroyed, several vehicles couldn't continue. In the end, only one Sherman tank remained. Its nickname was Besotten Jenny. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. On the way, they encountered an SS roadblock. A short but fierce firefight followed. After forcing their way through, the rescue force finally reached the castle. Inside, the prisoners couldn't believe what they were seeing. American soldiers standing beside German soldiers. The war itself seemed to have turned upside down. Captain Lee suggested everyone stay inside for safety, but the prisoners refused. Many of them had spent years waiting for freedom. Now they had no intention of hiding. They picked up abandoned rifles and ammunition left behind by fleeing guards, former politicians, elderly generals, and even civilians prepared themselves for one final battle. At sunrise, the sound everyone feared finally echoed through the valley. At dawn on May 5, 1945, the first artillery shells slammed into the castle walls. Moments later, dozens of Waffen-SS soldiers emerged from the surrounding forest, advancing from every direction. Inside the castle stood one of the most unlikely armies ever assembled: American soldiers, German Wehrmacht defectors, Austrian resistance fighters, and French political prisoners. Men who only days earlier had been enemies were now fighting shoulder to shoulder for the same cause. The battle quickly turned into chaos. Bullets ripped through the ancient stone walls, windows exploded, smoke filled the courtyards. Captain Jack Lee's Sherman tank, Besotten Jenny, fired everything it had, stopping the first wave of attackers, but the SS brought anti-tank weapons. Within minutes, the Sherman was hit. Its gun fell silent. The defenders had just lost their strongest weapon. Now they were badly outnumbered. Even worse, their ammunition was running low. Every bullet had to count. The defenders moved from window to window, firing only when they had a clear shot. Hours passed. The SS kept attacking. Each assault came closer than the last. Then tragedy struck. Former French Prime Minister Paul Reynaud stepped into an exposed area during the fighting. Without hesitation, Major Joseph Gangel rushed forward to protect him. A sniper hidden in the trees fired a single shot. The bullet struck Gangel in the head. He collapsed instantly. The German officer who had betrayed the Nazi regime gave his life protecting a French prisoner. It was a sacrifice almost impossible to imagine just weeks earlier, but there was no time to mourn. The battle continued. Inside the castle, ammunition was almost gone. Some defenders searched fallen soldiers for extra magazines. Others prepared for hand-to-hand combat if the SS broke through the gates. For a brief moment, it seemed the castle would fall. Then, in the distance, came the sound everyone had been waiting for: American reinforcements. Soldiers from the 36th Infantry Division rushed toward the castle, attacking the SS from behind. Caught completely by surprise, the attackers began to retreat. Some surrendered, others fled into the forests. After hours of desperate fighting, the Battle of Castle Itter was finally over. Every French prisoner inside the castle survived. Captain Jack Lee was later awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his extraordinary leadership. Major Joseph Gangel became a national hero in Austria. Today he is remembered not as a soldier who fought for Nazi Germany, but as the German officer who chose humanity over blind loyalty. Just 2 days later, on May 7, 1945, Germany officially surrendered. The war in Europe was over. Yet the Battle of Castle Itter remains one of the most extraordinary moments of the Second World War, a battle where Americans and Germans stood on the same walls, firing at the same enemy. For one final day, history ignored uniforms, and courage became more important than the side a man once fought for. Sometimes, the greatest heroes are the ones who choose to change sides. When they know what is right, the SS had arrived.